Well, good morning, everybody. Great to see everyone virtually, as is the way that we all are nowadays in terms of presenting. This is the fourth session that we've got in terms of the Business Owners Strategy Forum that we created to obviously stay connected and share information as we have done for the last 3 weeks or so. I'm your host again today. I'm Matt Murphy, Managing Partner of Prime Accounting and Business Advisory. So just welcome you all this morning to today's event. And really the purpose, just to reiterate this, is all about connecting together as business owners, sharing information. Obviously there's lots of it going around at the moment, supporting each other, helping strategize and implement strategy, which is really important when we're facing what we're facing at the moment in terms of some pretty difficult, critical times for our businesses and our lives. So from that perspective, that's why this has been created and why we're here to help support everybody who's jumped in on the call today again. So today, what we are going to discuss and present to you in the same format is we're going to do an update on the government stimulus packages, which are really important because we know that we get lots of questions about that during the week from our clients. And so, this is a great way to share. And we're going to talk about grant funding available. So obviously there's lots of grants traditionally available, but there's more coming online at the moment. So it's really important to be across those to see how we can access those. So we're going to speak about that today. We're also going to touch upon some of the, really creative stories that are happening in the marketplace in businesses where businesses are pivoting and changing their strategy to really try and effectively ride out or become more pivot in this difficult time so the businesses keep operating. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And then after we get through the presentations, we'll do questions and answers because we believe that's probably the best way to go is to actually do the presentations, give you as much content as we possibly can, and then go into Q&A. Now, we managed to get through all the questions and answers in previous sessions. However, we do have a chat forum as well that we've created, which we provide you with an invitation on at the end of the session that you can join in and connect and answer questions as well. So we'll be able to do that for you. So we're going to jump into it now. So we're going to have our first presenter, Matt Smith, who's one of our partners at Prime. He's going to talk about an update on the stimulus package. Now, we actually had sort of legislation passed on the JobKeeper legislation that came through. And so Matt's going to talk a little bit about that this morning because we presented on it last week. And Matt presented the week before on some of the stimulus package. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt now to really give us an update as to some of the detail behind the accessibility of the stimulus packages that are available. So thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Yep.
Okay, so as Matt alluded to last night, both Houses of Parliament have passed the JobKeeper pretty much unchanged from its original form. And so what we thought we'd do today is just go through a bit of a recap on just what JobKeeper is, who's eligible, go through the ATO's released a really good fact sheet with respect to a lot of the common questions that we're getting asked by clients. So I thought I would just pull out a few of those relevant ones that I've been getting asked on several occasions. We don't have all the answers yet because the legislation only passed late last night. There'll still be plenty more to follow in the coming days. But we do definitely have a lot more than we had this time last week even. So we thought we'd just cover off on a few of those. So just to recap, what is the JobKeeper payment? So it's a payment to eligible businesses and not-for-profits that are affected by COVID. those eligible businesses that elect to participate, and that's a pretty key point, is that it's definitely an election and a process that each business will need to, I guess, opt into. Is that for eligible businesses, they will receive $1,500 per fortnight per eligible employee. And again, there's lots of questions in and around what an eligible employee is, to support those businesses from the 30th of March through to the 27th of September, where they're eligible. They must have paid their employees to be entitled to receive a payment. So these are payments that are being made in arrears based on payments that have already been made. So I know a lot of employers have been keeping their powder dry, so to speak, just to find out the details before they go ahead and start making these payments. So if you are backdating payments, they will need to be made before the 30th of April to be then paid in arrears for the month of April. Where an employee's total remuneration is less than $1,500 per fortnight before tax, then the employee still needs to receive the full $1,500. So it's important that employers are topping up those wages. And just a few extra little things there. Self-employed individuals will be eligible, and there's some specific eligibility criteria there that we can go through. And I've mentioned those dates there already. For employers, so if your business has a turnover of less than $1 billion and your estimated or actual turnover has reduced by 30% or more, you will be eligible. And for charities, that estimated or actual turnover fall is only 15%. I guess that there's been a lot of questions in and around that 30%. How do we prove that? What if, there's a lot of what if scenarios in that, and we're starting to see a bit more clarity in respect of what that 30% actually means, either forward looking or actual compared to last year. And obviously those employees need to have been on the books at 1st of March. So it can't be for new hires, but it can be for reinstated employees if they were stood down or I guess made redundant as a result of the COVID-19 situation before we knew about the JobKeeper stimulus. So there's a bit of a link at the top there. Matt will post these slides to the workplace site after this session. So there's a bit of a link there to these frequently asked questions. So what I've done is just tried to pull out the ones that we're seeing most often, and I thought we would work through those. So as I mentioned before, the payments will be made monthly in arrears. So hence the timing. They're talking about the first payments will be made in the first week of May, which will relate to the period of April. Effectively, the payment period does start on that Monday, the 30th of March, but it'll be made a month in arrears based on the April payments made. Definitions of turnover. So the formal definition of turnover here that they're talking about, and this is relevant for whether we have dropped the 30% or not, is they're talking about based on the current calculations for GST. So the simple calculation is, for my BAS purposes, what am I posting in terms of my turnover compared to either previous periods or compared to projections. So we'll talk a little bit about the projection side of things soon, but that's effectively how they're using the formal easy test of have I dropped 30%? If you haven't dropped by 30% based on that test, then there are some other things that we can look at. Is the turnover related to Australia only, or does my overseas income become relevant? So at the moment, they're using Australian income only. My business has only just started, so this is one that we're hearing a lot of questions about. My business has only just started, or it has lumpy income. How do I self-assess that my turnover has fallen 30%? So effectively, to establish that the turnover has fallen in the relevant quarter, generally it would be the BAS relating to the previous year. However, if you weren't in operation at that time, you would need, because either it was a new business or it was an acquisition or something different, effectively they've said the commission is going to have discretion on these things. So what we're envisaging, and we don't have all the details yet, is that we're going to be able to put together a proposal or a set of documents to be able to show that here was our trading in, call it December, January, February. Here's our trading in March that relates specifically to a drop-off because of COVID, and then the commissioner will have the discretion to still allow that. So some other questions in and around the 30%. It hasn't dropped yet, but we can see that it's coming. Will I still be eligible? So particularly, for example, builders. Builders might have projects that are funded at the moment and they're still all systems go because the purchaser still wants their building completed. The funding's there. So, but what happens in 2 months' time when no new projects are coming on? So effectively, what will happen is at that time you will then likely fall eligible, and you would then be able to receive it for 4 months of the 6 months. But there is at this stage a formal stop date of the 27th of September. So if you only start 2 months in, my understanding is that you won't then be able to get 6 months of JobKeeper from that 2 month point. You will only receive 4 months of the 6 months of JobKeeper. I think we've pretty much covered off on that. So what should I do if I want to rehire an eligible employee who received a redundancy package? So this is a pretty common one that I've been talking to with my clients at the moment. Effectively, you would need to talk about unwinding that redundancy. And I guess this would relate to an employee that was made redundant purely for COVID purposes. If you're thinking of unwinding the redundancy for the period of the JobKeeper to make them eligible, but still we're thinking that there might be a redundancy event if nothing changed at the end of the 6 months, then you probably just need to consider whether that is the right, decision to unwind that redundancy. This one's purely for if it's a redundancy based on COVID only, they're a good employee, you want to keep them on if you can, then that would be the situation. Another one where we've got multiple entities in a group, we've either running a labour hire company or we've got an employment entity within our group. This is one that we're getting asked often. So the main trading entity purely pays a labour hire fee across to the actual employment entity. So it would be the employment entity the direct employer that would be entitled to the JobKeeper. So you would need to obviously ensure that the payments going through to that employment entity in terms of its revenue were decreased by the same, percentage that your main trading entity's turnover had reduced. So, the government have been at pains to ensure that people are not, inverted commas, rorting this system by decreasing turnover where it otherwise wouldn't be relevant. So I think the logical position here to ensure that you weren't falling foul of any of those items would be to be reducing the labour hire entity's income where you have control of that debtor-creditor relationship by the same amount as the main trading entities' turnover had fallen. So self-employed, we mentioned we were going to talk briefly about this. So yes, self-employed are definitely eligible, and you've got some criteria there that I probably won't go through all of it, but it's not too dissimilar to any other business. It talks about the 30% loss of income relative to the supplies made in the previous periods. And interestingly, partnerships, trusts, and companies where directors are receiving either directors' fees or as shareholders payments only, but for their labour, they would also be eligible. But there are some restrictions on that in terms of how many directors and how many partners / beneficiaries of trusts are eligible. They've capped that at 1 per entity. And just finally on those, in terms of being a landlord, if you're not registered under an ABN, as in running a business, then you wouldn't be entitled to JobKeeper. So I guess here we're talking about commercial landlord versus, I guess, residential landlord. You might be a mum and dad investor who have a rental property. Well, you wouldn't be entitled to JobKeeper. But if you had a registered commercial leasing operation that had employees, then you would be entitled to JobKeeper. In terms of the process for self-employed, it'll be an online application process. So I think it'll be more of that manual process as opposed to an automated process. So that's all on the JobKeeper side of things. As Matt said, we'll definitely come back for some questions and interpretations later. We just wanted to also, if I've got 2 minutes left, Matt, do I? Yep. I just wanted to run through quickly another item that was released by the government this week in and around the mandatory code for rent relief. This is a 7-page document that sort of goes through the expectations of the government in the current environment and how people should be dealing with each other. So it relates to retail, office and industrial, between owners, operators, landlords and tenants. So effectively what they're trying to ensure is that for any small business up to a turnover of 50 million, that is eligible for JobKeeper. In other words, they're affected by COVID. That they're putting some things in place that ensures protection for both parties. So rent reductions should be based on the decline in turnover, and we'll go through an example in a minute of what that means. The policy includes mutual obligations requirements on both the small businesses and the tenants and the actual landlords as well, because it's not just a one-way street. There needs to be some responsibility taken by the tenants as well. And there's an expectation that the banks are providing relief to the landlords so that the landlords can in turn provide relief to the tenants. So again, I've put in the link there to the document, so it's definitely worth having a read. It's a fairly easy document to read, and I think it makes it really clear as to the path forward if you are seeking rent relief in your business. So I've just put in here just a quick example of one that they've included in the document, which would be where a qualifying tenant would be provided with cash flow relief in proportion to the loss of the turnover they've experienced from COVID-19. So a 60% loss in turnover would result in a guaranteed 60% cash flow relief. So what does that mean? At a minimum, half of that 60% relief would be provided as rent-free or a rent waiver. So a complete, reduction, permanent reduction for the proportion of which the qualified tenant's revenue has fallen, and then up to half through a deferral of rent, which would then be recouped over a minimum of 24 months. So they couldn't ask for it the day you reopen, or that things, I guess, formally go back to normal. It would be repaid over the 24 months. So half completely gone, half recovered at a later point. Now, if the tenant's revenue has fallen by 100%, then 50% would be cash flow relief, either rent-free or rent waiver now. The remainder would be a deferral. So I think that kind of makes sense. Care should be taken to ensure that any repayments of the deferred rent doesn't compromise the ability of the tenant to recover from the crisis, and the parties would be free to make an alternative arrangement if they wished. So hopefully there's a fair bit of content there, but hopefully that was some help, and I'll stop sharing and I'll pass it back to Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Look, the reality is each one of these presentations we give over the last sort of 3 weeks and plus today could go on for an hour each. What we're trying to do is give as much content and information as we possibly can to you, and that's the reason why we are keeping these pretty tight, and then also sharing them on our workplace, and also being available for questions on specific circumstances as well. So, but thanks for being concise, Matt. Lots in it, but appreciate what you've just shared with us. So I'm just going back to my screen now. So what we also wanted to present on today is some grant funding available, because obviously cash is king at the moment, and the more we can get our hands on some cash to help our businesses through this particular situation. Obviously, the government stimulus packages are designed around supporting us from a cash perspective, but the grant funding available that's traditionally been in this country for many, many years is still available, and has been added to by a number of new programs that have been released by the government. So one of our partners, John Driscoll, is going to present just quickly on some of the main ones that we see that our clients access, and some of the new ones that are coming online now. So I'll hand it over to John to share his screen and present on this topic.
Fantastic, thanks, Matt. I'll let me just share my screen. Very good. So just to reiterate, I think it's very important just to note that these grants are still very active and very available. So never has it been a better time to actually go for some state and federal grants. The ones that I've sort of noted here are a combination between entitlement-based and competitive grants. The first 4 of the ones that you can see on the screen, the Research Development Tax Incentive, the Export Market Grant, the Business Growth Grant, and the Innovation Connections Grant are all entitlement-based. By that, it means that if you're doing what the eligibility criteria are asking for, then effectively you are entitled to get the benefit from these grants. The other 4 or 5 ones that I've noted are actually competitive. However, we've had multiple applications with these grants and had a lot of success for as well. So as a secondary note, a lot of these grants that we're going to talk to today, we all sort of prepare and do and have relative amount of success with, and also they're not a great drain on the business to actually prepare for these grants. So the first one I'd like to actually touch on is the Research and Development Tax Incentive. It's an entitlement grant. If you're doing R&D and what they qualify and talk to as the qualifications for R&D, then effectively you can get 43.5 cents in the dollar cash back, and that comes back every financial year. So effectively, you have to lodge an application with Oz Industry, and then they will generate a number that provides a schedule that will go in your tax return, and therefore the ATO would then refund the benefit back to the company. It comes back fairly reliable about 4 to 6 weeks after lodging your tax return if you're successful. The government through this COVID-19 has actually extended the deadline for lodgement. General lodgement deadlines for this initiative were 30 April 2020. However, they've extended it now to September 20 this year. So you still have time to lodge an application for this R&D tax incentive for the year ended June 30, 2019. The next one, again, is the Export Market Development Grant, the EMDG. And I know it's difficult times with regard to export markets. However, this was another program that's been around for a long time, but also the government is increasing the benefit. They recently just announced that they're putting in another $50 million into this program to support these export initiatives. So the Export Market Development Grant basically covers any sort of costs related to developing an international market, excluding New Zealand, North Korea, and Iran. So it'll pay for you to have an overseas representative, marketing consultants, communications and marketing, and that can basically be Google AdWords if you can validate traffic coming to your website from international markets. Promotional literature, so taking booklets and pamphlets over to trade shows and trade fairs, and then also, to some cases, international IP registration. So the next two form part of what's called the Entrepreneurs Program. The Entrepreneurs Program is effectively a national program that has 3 or 4 different arms that make up the Entrepreneurs Program. The first part of it is a business growth grant. It is it's an entitlement-based grant. So effectively, if you're turning over more than 1.5 mil or incurring 1.5 mil in expenditure, you immediately qualify to go to the business growth grant, which effectively will, the government will provide you up to $40,000 and they will give you $20,000 to improve business processes, systems, any other sort of initiatives, even to help support drafting marketing plans if you're looking to then branch into the international markets and doing the export market development grant. The Innovation Connections is actually an interesting one. The government has set up a body that helps you engage with universities to bridge the research gap. So if a company actually has a project that they would like to engage a university to help research them with regards to their facilities or a PhD student, they can actually use the government to actually coordinate that with the university, but the government will also fund up to $50,000. Again, it's entitlement based and you're allowed to have 2 projects per year running with this, so up to $200,000 in funding, 50% funded by the government. So the business growth grant, as I touched on previously, it's entitlement based. As long as you're a company incorporated in Australia or have a trust with the corporate trustee, your turnover is between 1.5 million and 100 million. However, there is a provision that can be expense related as well. So if you have expenses of 1.5 mil, then you qualify for that as well. You do need to be in one of the noted growth areas around products, services, market delivery. However, they do have the case consultants who administer this program have a great degree of discretion about what industries and where they see your business fits. So certainly if you're interested or have the view that you may fit into it, it's definitely worthwhile having a conversation. And the final one that falls under the Entrepreneur Program is actually the Accelerating Commercialisation Grant. It's been around for about 15 years in different sort of formats and versions. However, the current version is upward of $1 million worth of funded. So you can have a project within your business that could be funded to the point of $2 million, as long as a business can find funding for 50% of it. Accelerating Commercialisation is an amazing program. As I said, it can be funded up to $1 million. However, the minimum project size can be $150,000. So you may have a project that is not to the scale of a $2 million project, but it might be to $300,000 or $400,000. And certainly the government, you can put an application to the government to get that partially 50% supported to help commercialise and scale that business. Now, they are looking for scalability and they are looking for pre-sales. So generally, the criteria, there is some criteria about being in a corporate vehicle. You have to find at least 50% of the funding for the projects. However, you do need to be able to scale both domestically and internationally. And also, you can't be in sales effectively before you get the application. So it has to be pre-sales. The government is considerate of testing and beta sales, which is okay to go for it. However, if you're in commercial sales, then you've effectively too far down the path to get this one. The Female Founders Forum, it's actually a new program. It just got released a month or 2 ago, and really it's there to help promote and encourage female founders. There's 2 tiers to the Female Founders Program. It is competitive, and this one actually does close on the 14th of April, so we're sort of fast approaching the application close date. The actual application process is 2 stages. One is an expression of interest, and the other one is once you get through the expression of interest, then you'll be asked to, if you're successful, you'll be asked to put in a full application. The application is very similar to the process undertaken when you're going for the Accelerating Commercialisation Grant, and it'll be dependent on which tier you go for as well. So as I said, there's 2 tiers to this program. There's tier 1, which provides funding between $25,000 and $120,000, and tier 2 is upward of $480,000. There isn't any sort of real distinction between what stage of the business can go for which tier. It's more about the ability for the female founder to scale up and expand into domestic markets, both here and internationally. So looking more now, instead of the national or federal grants, we're looking at some of the localised funding and support initiatives. So recently released was a business support fund. It's a Victorian-based grant. It's providing one-off $10,000 to help businesses cover general operating costs around utilities and rents and other sort of activities with regard to the business. The main eligibility criteria is around staffing and staffing levels. So if you're an employer, an SME business in Victoria, and you're sort of eligible for this, it's absolutely paramount that you would absolutely put in an application to get some funding support around covering some of your working capital costs. The next one's around the Queensland initiative. So back in about 2015, our state government here in Queensland went down an early stage innovation program, and so the Ignite Ideas was born off the back of those programs, and really they are there to exactly do what they say: ignite an idea. We've had 6 separate funding rounds for the Ignite Ideas, the round 1s and the tier 2s, and then the current round 6 is actually currently being assessed at the moment, and then with the expectations that they will open around 7 in May. However, it has been delayed a little bit with what's going on with the COVID-19 at the moment, but there is an expectation that round 7 will be opened next month. So effectively, you can go for $100,000 or $200,000, depending on the stage and development of your business. The more mature your opportunity is, or the technology, the IP, the greater the opportunity is around getting more funding for those type of ventures. And I guess the final one I wanted to talk about was it's effectively an equity investment by the Queensland government. The Queensland government provided a fund of approximately $80 million, and they administered through the Queensland Investment Corporation here in Queensland. Effectively, if you have an investor that's looking to invest, the government will co-fund that investment to the same investment valuation and deal size as the original investor. So it's been very successful and very popular here in Queensland. So effectively, if someone wants to put in $1 million for 10% of your business, then the government will match it for $1 million for 10%. But one of the unique and novel situations is that the actual investor can buy the investment back from the government at the same valuation it went in. So effectively, if the business goes from a valuation of $10 million to $100 million, the existing investor can buy it back off the government at the $10 million valuation.
Thanks, John. That's fantastic. Obviously, there's lots of just if you can stop sharing your screen at the moment, mate. Otherwise, we'll get to see what's inside your email.
Sure. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right.
As I said, there's lots in that. So if anyone does have any questions, please make sure you can either reach out or ask questions during the forum.
Great, thanks, John. There's plenty. I think there's $550 million worth of government grants across 3 levels of government. So there's a lot out there available, and obviously we need all the support we can get at the moment. So that's been great. So thanks for sharing some of those new ones and some of the existing ones that are really needed for what we've got at the moment. The last presenter that we've got today, which is probably just a quick sort of snapshot as to really some of the really creative, interesting things that are happening out in the marketplace. And Mark Bowe is a special advisor at Prime Accounting Business Advisory, and he does a lot of commercialization work for clients and also sort of strategy around pivoting. And at the moment, he's just going to share a couple of quick examples today, but we might go into more detail on that next week, because I think it sort of helps to get this sort of creative thought process in our businesses and how we actually go about that. So So, Mark, I'm going to hand it over to you to just to share a couple of quick examples that you've got at the moment around this, and then after that, we'll open it up into question time for everybody, and then we'll close after that.
No problem. Thanks very much, Matt. I'll just share my screen with everybody. Okay. So basically, over the effectively starting early in March, I'll give two examples of companies that we've worked with. The first one we've worked with is a group of fellows down in Dandenong who run a Willy Bin cleaning company, and some of the things that they were concerned about is they had a massive drop-off in revenue, particularly in regards to elective surgery in hospitals, and also a large area of business that they have in the hospitality marketplace. So what we did was the following. Obviously went through a fairly deep process, but one of the businesses they had was actually providing specialist probiotic chemicals to clean washrooms and toilets and floors and whatnot. So went down there, we started a sprint, and in 48 hours from having a product that was used in a washroom, we created a fast-moving consumer good product, which you can see an example on the screen, called an odor control spray, which is a probiotic. And from there, within 48 hours, had booked meetings with both Woolies, Coles and Bunnings, and we're just finalising the arrangement for listing in Bunnings as we speak this week. So effectively, from ideation to in-market in 48 hours. Another example we did with that organisation too is one of the biggest issues that they saw is they said, look, we need to pivot into new opportunities. So we looked at this concept of cleaning waste chutes in buildings. So this was on the start of March. So we looked at how we started, once again, an agile project. We created a brand called Waste Chute Cleaning Man. But one thing we realised was there was an opportunity to not only look at how they clean waste chutes, but more importantly, the global market. What we did from that was, you can see up here, we did some idea generation sketching, and we effectively built a prototype robot that can go up and down a chute to automate the cleaning of it. So we went in 30 days and an associated business plan, go to market, and who the customers were. What they've accumulated is, you can see the benchtop example here, that robot is now finished. And we have an organisation that's already decided to purchase the first robot from Waste Chute Cleaning Man, and to move that, we've had some discussions already last week with the Americans and some of their high risers. So once again, start of March, end of March, we've got a prototype ready to go. Once again, and a totally new market for this organisation based on the premise that they weren't going to stand still. Next one is we worked with another client called TGM Group Holdings, right in the thick of it. They have, some of the people in Victoria know the Jolly Miller Cafe outlets. They have 15 cafes around Victoria, and middle of last year, they bought a food manufacturing and wholesaling business called Fig Food Co, which supplies 500 restaurants and cafes in Victoria with fresh food and product every day. So 340 staff, they were really concerned. But we pulled the team together. We did something really simple. We actually went shopping, saw there was an out of stock in a pharmacy. We had all these people in the manufacturing plant. We had alcohol, we had everything. So what we did, within 24 hours, we went through the whole TJ website, found out everything that needed to be found out about launching a healthcare product in Australia. And remember, these are people who make cakes. And from there, we did formulations, went off to a very well-known branding agency, went to some chemists, and I can let you know that $300,000 worth of product is now in the Australian market being sold of the Jolly Care product that wasn't there at the start of March. It wasn't even a brand. So some really quick examples of how people had pivoted, plenty more. And we've been speaking to multiple clients who really just putting their hands up going, what do I do? Where's the next dollar coming from? And we haven't taken these approaches on the basis of a quick buck. We've taken these approaches on sustainable business planning and how to move that forward. But as you said, Matt, we can go into some more detail about the how that worked. So yeah, back to the group.
Thanks, Mark. Look, the reason I got Mark to present just sort of quickly today, because just to give everybody sort of a sense that, you know, crisis does present a time of opportunity for us. And really, you know, those three examples are awesome in terms of the speed in which it was created. And that was the thing that blew me away a little bit when I was talking to Mark the other day about it, and then saw some of these examples. And I asked him about the process in which he goes through and that we go through with our clients to actually get to that level. And, you know, we'll probably touch upon that more next week when we've got a bit more time. I think that'll be sort of next week's presentation, partly around how do you pivot in your business to, you know, keep it sustainable and thriving in a crisis with what we're dealing with, where traditional business lines are you know, drying up, and we're trying to keep our businesses operating and our staff employed. So it'd be well worthwhile having that conversation next week. So looking forward to that, Mark, for you presenting that. In terms of today, there's obviously lots of information and lots of content there. We're starting to get some questions coming through, so I'm going to start to hand it over into question time. So if you've got questions, please use the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen there. That's probably the best place to ask the questions rather than chat. I failed to sort of say that at the start of the session, so I apologise for that, but we'll cover the questions that are in the chat as well. But so I'll get everybody back online again, and also using cameras so I can actually, so you can answer the questions. But just wanted to firstly thank everybody for their time today to present the data and the information in such a short period of time. And even, you know, with Matt, for example, the legislation just got passed last night, and so he had a bit of a late night sort of scrambling and getting some information to us. So that's what this is all about. This is all about, you know, trying to deliver as much content information for our business owners, because we just want to help as much as we possibly can.